Today, we separate Islam from culture using Qur'an and Sunnah. Islam is not merely a set of rituals, it is a complete way of life. It is revelation, foundation sent down by the Creator of the heavens and the earth, conveyed to us through the final prophet Muhammad. These foundations are meant to guide how we think, how we choose, and how we move through life itself. Culture, on the other hand, is shaped by people, how they interact with one another, how they relate to their surroundings, how traditions form over time. And culture naturally changes depending on geography, history, and circumstance. What Islam does is not erase culture, but refine it. It acts as a filter, preserving what is good and removing what is harmful without destroying the identity of a people. This is where the challenge arises. In many cases, Muslims, especially in the Muslim world, practice Islam more through inherited culture than through revelation itself. Certain traditions, behaviors, and ways of interacting have been passed down for generations, and because they are so familiar, people assume they are part of Islam. But they are not necessarily revelation. Some of these practices existed long before Islam reached those societies, yet over time they became mistaken for religious truth. So the struggle today is learning to separate the two, what is truly Islamic and what is simply cultural. We discussed various beliefs people hold, omens, signs, superstitions, ideas shaped by climate, environment, and community. But Islam gives us clear foundations to deal with these things. The first is Tawheed, the absolute oneness of Allah. Above all else, our dependence is on the Creator. When facing decisions, Islam gives us istikhara, a prayer where we ask Allah to guide us, to make clear which path is best. Alongside this is tawakkul, trusting the Creator's plan, even when it unfolds through hardship. That may sound strange, but if we reflect on our lives, we often find that sickness, loss, or calamity brought us closer to Allah and pushed us toward growth. Islam also gives us dua, direct communication with the Creator. This intimate connection is one of the defining features that separates Islam from other ways of life. And in our dealings with people, Islam establishes shura, mutual consultation, showing that the faith does not only address spirituality, but also human relationships, leadership, and even politics. The Prophet taught optimism as a foundation of faith. He said that a good omen is a good word, hopeful speech, positive expectation. When he sent his companions out, he would remind them, give glad tidings. Do not repel people. Make things easy. Do not make them difficult. This principle of Bashiru, spreading hope, is central to how Islam approaches life. Yet despite all of this, there is a dangerous reality we must confront, and I emphasize this because it remains widespread in many Muslim societies. Instead of relying on Allah, some people turn to folk traditions when thinking about the future. Fortune tellers, psychics, crystal balls, bone casting. You may be surprised, but even in the so-called advanced world of the 21st century, these practices are still deeply rooted across cultures, including Muslim communities. The Prophet warned with absolute clarity, whoever goes to a fortune teller and believes what he says has disbelieved in what was revealed to Muhammad. This is not a casual statement. To seek out such predictions and accept them is to step outside the foundation of Islam itself. The word kafir is not used lightly. It is a grave matter, and the seriousness of this warning shows how deeply Islam protects the purity of faith, trust, and reliance on Allah alone. And what may come as a surprise to many is that this even extends into astrology. Horoscopes, zodiac signs. All of it is tied together. And to be clear, we are not talking about astronomy. Astronomy is a natural science. The danger lies in people casually reading horoscopes, treating them like harmless entertainment, a joke, and then slowly allowing themselves to be influenced by them. And as we learned, it doesn't stop there. There is palm reading, tarot cards, energy readings, I Ching, different variations of the same idea, constantly reshaped with time. Some of it has even moved online now, evolving with technology while carrying the same core belief beneath it. We also touched again on amulets, and I emphasize this because of how deeply they influence people. Hanging an amulet, the prophets clearly stated, is a form of shirk when power is attributed to it. When someone believes that an object, something hung over a door, worn around the wrist, or placed in a home, has the ability to protect or bring benefit, they are giving power to something other than Allah. People express this in different forms. Good luck bracelets. Blue beads. I remember traveling to Turkey, visiting homes in Istanbul, and everywhere you went, you would see this blue eye. The Eye of Tengri. I was curious, so I looked into it further. I even noticed it at the entrance of a Turkish restaurant on Yonge Street in Toronto. That same blue eye. It traces back to ancient Central Asian beliefs, Tengriism, a deep-rooted superstition. Many who come from that tradition believe that placing this eye somewhere will ward off demons, evil spirits, bad luck, all of these things. In this part of the world, we had our own versions. Horseshoes, rabbit's feet, special threads, lucky numbers, symbols. All of it falls under tayyara, superstition. These are cultural elements that Islam teaches us to remove, to weed out. Now, Islam does recognize that there are legitimate ways to seek help. There is ruqya, when someone may be spiritually unwell, or in some cases affected by jinn, these unseen forces. The Qur'an itself, and supplications from the Sunnah of the Prophet, can be recited over that person. Seeking barakah, blessings, is valid when it stays within the framework of the Prophet's tradition. But we must be careful of anything that steps outside those boundaries. This is a general summary of what we covered when examining these practices. And now, we move into a much broader area, one that holds significant weight in Islamic jurisprudence. It is known as urf. Urf refers to custom, the fact that every region of the world has its own traditions that shape daily life. Scholars have given consideration to these customs when making judgments. Naturally, when faced with a decision, one turns first to the Quran, then to the teachings of the Prophet. But in some cases, custom also plays a role. Not all customs are equal, some are acceptable, others are not. Take clothing, for example. Muslims are not required to dress exactly as Arabs do in the Arabian Peninsula, nor must they dress like Indonesians, Turks, or Pakistanis. There are no fixed colors, no single cultural uniform. People can develop clothing that reflects Islamic values while using the fabrics, styles, and colors of their own country. What we avoid, as we learned, is clothing that is see-through, excessively tight, or driven by immodest fashion trends. Modesty remains the guiding principle. Through years of working with different communities, I found that the most sensitive areas where this tension appears are weddings and funerals. These are deeply emotional moments. And in emotional moments, people often return to tradition. I remember being in South Africa, where African traditional religion, rooted in ancestor worship, is very powerful. There was a sister in the community who wore hijab and was actively involved. When her husband passed away, we went to visit her. We found her dressed in green, with specific objects placed around her. We asked her about it. She said, "This is the way of our people." We said, "But you are Muslim." She replied, "Yes, but this is death." Eventually, through honest conversation, it became clear. She said that many people who embrace Islam treat it like a social space, a community. You attend gatherings. You wear the scarf. You eat halal food. But when it comes to serious moments, birth, marriage, death, they return to their original source. This is where Islam reaches another stage. If you look at the life of the Prophet Muhammad and the history of Islam anywhere in the world, there is always an initial phase. Islam enters a culture and begins to integrate. But then a moment comes when Tawheed, the oneness of Allah, demands a choice. At that point, people must decide which path they will follow. That is where it becomes truly serious. And again, marriage, birth, and death, these moments are critical. They reveal where faith truly stands. The Sharia, the way Islamic law functions, is fluid in nature. It is not rigid or frozen in time. It takes into account the customs and traditions of people while remaining rooted in its core principles. If we look back to the time of the Prophet Muhammad and the foundational period of Islam, we find that birthdays were not celebrated. Even among older generations from Muslim societies, many are unsure of their exact date of birth. It simply was not considered important. People generally knew when they were born, but the specific day itself did not carry significance. In contrast, many non-Muslim societies, particularly those rooted in sun worship or fire worship, placed great emphasis on the day of birth. Over time, some of these customs were passed down and remain visible today. The lighting of candles on a birthday cake, for example. If a child turns 10 candles are lit, and they are blown out. This practice traces back to ancient beliefs tied to the sun god and fire worship. In that sense, it is not an Islamic tradition nor something rooted in the teachings of Islam. As Islam spread and Muslims traveled across the world, it naturally influenced people. Islam is a powerful way of life, and it is human nature for people to imitate those who bring it to them. Whether Islam arrived through people from Arabia, Pakistan, Nigeria, or elsewhere, the local population often tried to resemble those carriers of the faith in dress, behavior, and culture. But after some time, questions arise. The people who brought Islam have their own culture, and the people receiving it already have theirs. This is where negotiation begins, an attempt to find balance. From my own experience, I observed this clearly while working with Muslim communities in South Africa. I spent time in Cape Town and interacted with Muslims in KwaZulu-Natal, Durban, as well as Johannesburg and other regions. Initially, many African Muslims adopted the dress and cultural practices of Indian or Malay Muslims who had brought Islam to them. It was a natural phase of imitation. This brings us to an important term you will often hear, bid'ah. Bid'ah means innovation, introducing something new. Linguistically, innovation can apply to worldly matters, technology, systems of organization, tools, and developments. These are generally acceptable within limits. The concern arises with innovation in religious rituals. If someone adds an extra prayer, invents new acts of worship, or introduces practices that are not rooted in the Qur'an or the Sunnah of the Prophet, then that becomes problematic. Creating new religious holidays, new forms of prayer, or new ritual practices. This is the area where bid'ah applies. The Prophet said, "Every new matter in the religion is an innovation, and every innovation leads astray, and every misguidance leads to the fire." People struggle with this concept, and online debates around bid'ah are common. Much of the confusion is linguistic. When some speak of good and bad innovation, they are often referring to worldly developments. But what the Prophet was addressing was innovation in religious practice. That is the critical distinction. Islam is a complete way of life. Its foundation is spirituality, a direct connection with Allah, and that connection reflects in one's character. At the same time, ritual practices are essential. Prayer, fasting, and acts of worship form the structure of faith. The danger comes when people fall into extremes. Some become overly ritualistic, performing actions without spirituality or character. Others are spiritual and kind, but neglect the actual practice of religion. The essence of Islam lies in the middle path, spirituality guided and regulated by ritual, all coming together as one complete system. Before concluding, there is another critical issue tied to culture: honor killings. In certain societies, pride is so deeply tied to masculinity and tribal honor that if a daughter marries without permission or runs away, the father kills her. In some of these societies, investigations take place, and if honor is cited, the man is not punished. This has absolutely no basis in Islam. Islam explicitly forbids this. What is important to understand is that this practice is not unique to Muslims. Similar customs existed in places like Argentina, particularly among cattle-grazing communities with deeply macho cultures centered around horses and masculinity. Regardless of where it occurs, it is entirely prohibited in Islam. The same applies to tribalism and racial superiority, any custom where tribe, race, or culture is elevated above religion. Islam rejects this completely. We see this imbalance even in marriage, where people sometimes place more importance on family status or lineage than on faith. Islam restores balance here as well. The Prophet taught that marriage may be sought for 4 reasons: wealth, beauty, lineage, and religion. And he said that the one who prioritizes deen, the way of life, will be successful. This does not mean the other factors are irrelevant. They do have an influence. But deen remains the foundation. That is the balance Islam establishes: firm principles, flexible application, and a clear hierarchy of values.